Greetings and welcome back to the lesson. Today we are going to study the key components of compliance risks. We'll also look at the strategies that a company may use to mitigate against compliance risk. Compliance risk. But first of all, what do we mean by compliance risk? Now, compliance risk refers to the potential for legal or regulatory sanctions, financial loss, or reputational damage that a company may incur as a result of failing to comply with laws, regulations, internal policies, or industry standards. So this is the risk that a company may face sanctions, or a company may incur losses, or a company may have what we call a reputational damage because of failing to obey laws, regulations, and rules. So if a company does not comply, if a company does not adhere to rules or laws, then there are chances that that company's reputation may be damaged. There are chances that that company may incur financial losses, or there are chances that the company may face regulatory sanctions. And that is what we are referring to as compliance risk. And in Kenya, companies operate in a complex regulatory environment with numerous laws and regulations that govern various aspects of their operations, such as taxation, financial reporting, environment. We have laws related to consumer protection and so on. So what are some of the key compliance risks? That's what we want to first study. Compliance risks. There are various compliance risks. One is the legal and regulatory non-compliance. One, legal and non-regulatory compliance. Legal and non-regulatory compliance. This includes the risk of violating laws and regulations such as the Companies Act, the Capital Markets Act, the Banking Act, the Insurance Act, and various environmental and labor laws. And non-compliance can lead to fines, penalties, licenses may be revoked, there could be criminal charges, and so on. Legal and non-regulatory compliance. Legal and non-regulatory compliance. Then we have number two. This is legal and non-regulatory. Legal and non-regulatory compliance. The second point is anti-corruption and bribery. Anti-corruption and bribery. In Kenya, there are stringent and anti-corruption laws, and companies may face the risk of being implicated in corrupt practices such as bribery. We have fraud, embezzlement of funds, and that can lead to significant financial and reputational damages. Another risk is related to data, data protection, data protection and privacy. Data protection and privacy. Now, with the increasing reliance on technology and digital data, companies must today comply with data protection and privacy laws to safeguard sensitive customer and employee information. And non-compliance can result in legal action, financial penalties, and also loss of customer trust. So there is that risk related to data protection and privacy. 4, environmental and social impact. Environmental and social impact. Companies must adhere to environmental regulations and social responsibility standards in order to minimize their negative impact on the environment and their negative impact on communities. And failure to do so can lead to regulatory sanctions, it can lead to public backlash, it can lead to reputational damage, and so on. So there is that risk associated with the environment and social impact. 5, we have what we call industry specific standards. Industry specific standards. Now, certain industries such as banking industry, telecommunications industry, insurance industry, healthcare, they have specific regulations that companies must comply with. And non-compliance can result in fines, it can result in penalties, it can also result in loss of operational licenses. There is also the risk, compliance risk in relation to industry specific standards. Industry specific standards. So these are 5 compliance risks. Number 1, legal and regulatory compliance. Number 2, anti-corruption and bribery. Number 3, data protection and privacy. Number 4, environmental and social impact. Then number 5, industry specific standards. Let us now discuss some of the strategies for managing compliance risks. Strategies for managing. Let me discuss strategies here. Strategies for managing compliance. Strategies for managing compliance risks. The first strategy is to establish a robust compliance framework. 1, establish a robust compliance. Establish a robust compliance framework. Now, companies should develop a comprehensive compliance framework that includes policies, procedures, and also controls to ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations. For a company to avoid these risks or to mitigate against these risks, then there ought to be a robust or comprehensive compliance framework that contains policies, procedures, and controls to ensure compliance with the laws. 2, conduct regular compliance reviews. Conduct regular compliance reviews. For a company to mitigate against compliance risk, then it has to conduct regular compliance reviews. Regular reviews and audits can help identify potential compliance gaps and ensure that policies and procedures are up to date and effective. So first of all, put in place, have the policies, the guidelines on how to comply with laws. Then carry out reviews check if the company is adhering to the policies that are set up in the compliance framework, so that if there are any gaps, the company can then take measures to update the policies and procedures. 3, provide a compliance training. Provide compliance training. Employees should be trained on the relevant laws. They should be trained on the relevant regulations. They should be trained on the company policies in order to ensure that they understand their compliance obligations and responsibilities. It is one thing to have the laws, but it is another for employees to understand or to even know the laws. So there has to be deliberate measures to ensure that employees are trained on the relevant laws, regulations, and rules, and also they ought to be trained on the compliance framework that is set up, providing guidance policies on how to adhere to these rules. So that can mitigate against um, compliance risks. Providing compliance training. 4, provide whistleblower mechanisms. Provide whistleblower mechanisms. Provide and then implement the mechanisms. There ought to be confidential reporting channels that are established to encourage employees to report potential compliance violations, and that ought to be done without any fear of retaliation. Confidential reporting channels should be established in order to encourage employees to report any potential compliance violations without fear of retaliation. Provide whistleblower mechanisms, implement whistleblower mechanisms. 5, stay informed about regulatory changes. Stay informed about regulatory changes. Companies should monitor changes in laws and regulations and update their policies and procedures accordingly. All these laws are subject to change. And when the change happens, a company should be aware of such changes. If not, then chances are that a company may not be able to comply with the changes that have been made in these laws. So the company should ensure that it's monitoring changes in laws and regulations, and then these changes should be reflected in the framework. Because if there's any change in the laws, then it has to affect the company's policies and procedures in relation to compliance. Do you understand? 6, engage external expertise. Engage external expertise. The company may seek external expertise such as lawyers, compliance consultants, in order to help them identify and manage compliance risks. So these are 6 strategies that a company may use to mitigate compliance risks. Number 1, establish robust compliance framework. 2, conduct regular compliance reviews. 3, provide compliance training. 4, implement whistleblower mechanisms. 5, stay informed about regulatory changes. 6, engage external expertise. We had identified 5 risks, compliance risks. One is the legal and regulatory compliance. 2, anti-corruption and bribery. 3, data protection and privacy. 4, environmental and social impact. 5, industry-specific standards. These are the key compliance risks. Now, the board candidates plays a major role in compliance risk management. The board of directors plays a crucial role in overseeing the complex issue to do with compliance risk management. And in closing, we can identify the role of the board What is the role of the board in compliance risk management, in management of compliance risk? The first role is to set the tone at the top. Setting the tone at the top. Setting the tone at the top. This means establishing a culture of compliance within the organization by demonstrating their commitment to ethical behavior and adherence to laws and regulations. The board should set an example by adhering or by obeying the laws and by ensuring that they adhere to regulations. Setting the tone at the top. The board of directors should demonstrate their commitment to ethical behavior, because a company that does not adhere to rules, you can categorize such a company as unethical. Board members that do not adhere to rules can be termed as exhibiting unethical behavior. So one way in which the board can play a role in risk compliance is to set the tone at the top. Ensure that they establish a culture of complying with laws, rules, and regulations. It should be known by every stakeholder in the company that the board is a board that adheres to laws, regulations, and rules, because then it trickles down. But where the stakeholders know that the board does not adhere to rules and regulations, then they may also emulate such a board. Do you understand? It always starts at the top. The second role is to approve compliance. Approve compliance. Approve compliance. Right? The board should approve compliance. And this, when I say compliance, I mean the policies should approve compliance policies. The board should approve compliance policies. You understand? It is the role of the board to review and approve compliance policies and procedures to ensure they are adequate, to ensure the policies are effective. Approve compliance policies. That is the role of the board. 3, oversee compliance activities. It is the role of the board of directors to oversee compliance activities, to monitor the compliance activities and also receive regular reports and compliance status, to receive regular compliance reports on compliance. That is the role of the board, overseeing compliance activities. The board should also ensure that there is adequate resources for compliance. Ensure adequate compliance resources. Ensure adequate compliance resources. Ensure that there is sufficient resources that are allocated to compliance function to enable effective risk management, because there can be no effective compliance if there are no resources. The board should ensure that they have provided for adequate, sufficient compliance resources for risk management. Lastly, it is the role of the board to ensure that compliance violations are addressed. Address compliance violations. Address compliance violations. The board should take prompt action to address any identified compliance violations and implement corrective measures. So these are 6 roles of the board. 1, setting the tone at the top. 2, approve compliance policies. 3, oversee compliance activities. 4, ensure adequate compliance resources. And lastly, address compliance violations. Address compliance violations. So candidates, by proactively managing compliance risk, companies can mitigate the potential for legal and regulatory sanctions. Companies can avoid financial losses, and companies can minimize reputational damage, ultimately contributing to the long-term success and sustainability of the company. So that's all we can say today in relation to compliance risk. Here is your today's assignment. 1, what are the primary compliance risks that organizations face? 2, how does the organization identify and assess compliance risks? 3, what measures can be put in place to mitigate compliance risks? 3, how does a board monitor and review the organization's compliance relevant laws and regulations? 5, what role do compliance officers play in managing compliance risks? 5 questions. Please attempt the questions. Bye-bye.